Welcome to the podcast. Learn English through life, exploring emotions, connections, and the English language.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Learn English Through Life. I'm your host, Michael, and today we're diving into an exciting and practical topic, how to start investing today. To help us understand this better, we have a special guest, James, a financial expert with over 10 years of experience. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. Investing can seem intimidating, but I'm here to simplify things and share actionable tips for your audience.
That's exactly what we need, James. Many of our listeners feel overwhelmed when they hear the word investing. It feels complicated and out of reach. What's the first step someone should take to get started?
That's a great question, Michael. And you're right. Many people feel that way. The truth is, investing doesn't have to be complicated. The very first step is to understand why you want to invest.
Why? Can you explain why this step is so important?
Of course. Without a clear purpose, it's like driving without a destination. You'll waste time and energy. When you invest, you need to know your financial goals. Are you saving for something specific, like a house or your retirement? Or do you just want to grow your money to achieve financial freedom? Let me share a quote from Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors of all time. Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. This reminds us that investing is about the long term. Knowing your goals helps you plant the right tree today for the future you want.
That's such a powerful quote, James. So, if I want to start investing, the first thing I need to do is define my goals?
Exactly. Take some time to think about your short-term and long-term goals. Write them down. For example, a short-term goal might be saving for a vacation or a new car in the next 2 to 3 years. A long-term goal could be building a retirement fund or saving for your children's education. Here's a practical exercise for our listeners. Grab a notebook or use your phone to create 2 columns, one for short-term goals and one for...
That makes so much sense. It's like creating a roadmap for your financial future.
Exactly. And once you have that roadmap, you can start creating a plan that matches your timeline and risk tolerance.
Risk tolerance? That sounds like something we need to explore next.
Absolutely, Michael. It's a critical part of investing wisely. But before we dive into that, let's remember another quote from Tony Robbins. Setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. So to all our listeners, take that first step. Define your goals. Because once you have a clear purpose, everything else becomes easier.
All right, James, now that we've discussed setting clear goals, let's dive into this idea of risk tolerance. It sounds like a complicated concept, but what does it really mean?
Great question, Michael. Risk tolerance is simply how much uncertainty or fluctuation in your investment you're comfortable with. Think of it like riding a roller coaster. Some people love the thrill, while others prefer a gentle ride.
That's a good analogy. So how does someone figure out their risk tolerance?
There are 3 main factors to consider. Your financial situation. If you have a stable income and savings for emergencies, you might take on more risk. Your investment timeline. The more time you have before you need the money, the more risk you can take. Your personality. Are you someone who stays calm during market ups and downs, or do you panic when things go south? To make it practical, let's use an example. Imagine 2 friends, Emma and John. Emma is 30 years old, has a steady job, and doesn't need her investment money for 20 years. She can take higher risks by investing in stocks or growth-oriented funds. John, on the other hand, is 55 and plans to retire in 10 years. He should focus on safer options like bonds or dividend-paying stocks to protect his capital.
That makes a lot of sense. But for beginners, how do they know what's too risky?
A good rule of thumb is to start with a balanced portfolio. For example, 60% in stocks for growth, 40% in bonds for stability. As you learn more, you can adjust this mix based on your comfort level. Also, there are free risk assessment tools online. Many investment platforms like Vanguard or Fidelity offer quizzes to help you understand your risk tolerance.
That's super practical, but what if someone takes too much risk?
If you take on too much risk, you might panic during a market downturn and sell at the worst time. Remember, investing is a marathon, not a sprint. Let me share a quote from Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing. The individual investor should act consistently as an investor and not as a speculator. This means staying calm and sticking to your plan, even when markets are volatile.
That's really helpful, James, but what about people who are too afraid to take any risk?
Avoiding all risk can also be dangerous. If you keep your money in a savings account, inflation will eat away at its value over time. The key is finding a balance that feels right for you. Start small with low risk.
That's such great advice. So, to recap, understand your financial situation, timeline, and personality. Start with a balanced portfolio or low-risk investments. Stay consistent and avoid emotional decisions.
Exactly, Michael. And remember this quote from Peter Lynch: know what you own and know why you own it. Understanding your risk tolerance is all about knowing yourself and your goals.
Amazing. Thanks for breaking that down, James. Now, what's the next step after understanding risk tolerance?
The next step is to start small. You don't need a lot of money to begin investing. Let's talk about that next.
All right, James, we've talked about setting goals and understanding risk tolerance. Now let's move on to something I think will excite our listeners: starting small. Many people believe they need thousands of dollars to begin investing. Is that true?
Not at all, Michael. This is one of the biggest myths about investing. You can start with as little as $10 or $20. Thanks to modern technology and financial tools, investing is more accessible than ever.
That's great to hear. So how can someone start investing with a small amount of money?
Let me break it down into 3 simple options. Fractional shares. Instead of buying a whole stock, which can cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars, you can buy a fraction of a share. For example, if a stock costs $500, you can invest just $50 and own 10% of that share. Apps like Robinhood, Acorns, or Stash make this possible. ETFs, exchange-traded funds. ETFs are a great way to start because they are diversified, meaning your money is spread across multiple companies. For example, an S&P 500 ETF allows you to invest in 500 top companies at once. You can buy an ETF for as little as $50 on most platforms. Robo-advisors. These are automated platforms that invest for you based on your goals and risk tolerance. Popular options like Wealthfront or Betterment make investing easy for beginners. You can start with as little as $10 or $100, depending on the platform.
That sounds super manageable, but how does someone decide which option is right for them?
It depends on your preferences and how much involvement you want. If you enjoy learning about individual stocks, go for fractional shares. If you prefer something simple and diversified, ETFs are the way to go. And if
That's great advice. I like the idea of just getting started even with a small amount. But James, how can beginners stay motivated when they're only investing $10 or $20?
Excellent question, Michael. The key is to remember that small amounts grow over time. There's a famous quote by Albert Einstein: "Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it."
That's inspiring. Can you give us an example of how compound interest works?
Sure. Let's say you invest $100 every month in an ETF that grows at an average rate of 8% per year. After 10 years, you'd have around $18,000, not just from your contribution.
Wow, that's amazing. It really shows the power of starting early and being consistent.
Exactly. Investing isn't about getting rich overnight. It's about building wealth steadily over time.
So, to recap this section, start small with fractional shares, ETFs, or robo-advisors. Remember the power of compound interest. Take the first step by opening an account today.
That's right, Michael. And here's one final tip. Investing is a habit. The more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Perfectly said, James. Let's move on to the next step, creating a monthly investment budget. So far, we've talked about setting goals, understanding risk tolerance, and starting small. Now, let's get into something practical, creating a monthly investment budget. James, why is this step so important?
Great question, Michael. A monthly investment budget helps you stay consistent. Investing isn't about how much you can invest once. It's about building the habit of investing regularly. As the saying goes, consistency is the key to success.
That's true, but many people feel like they don't have extra money to invest. How can they create space in their budget for this?
That's a common concern. The first step is to look at your spending and identify areas where you can save. Here's a simple strategy. Track your expenses for 1 month. Use an app like Mint or just a notebook.
That's an eye-opener. So, once someone finds extra money, how do they decide how much to invest?
A good rule of thumb is the 50-30-20 rule. 50% of your income goes to needs, like rent, groceries, and bills. 30% goes to wants, like dining out or entertainment. 20% goes to savings and investments. If 20% feels like too much, start with 10% or even 5%. The key is to get started, no matter how small the amount.
That's a smart rule. But what if someone has debts? Should they still invest?
It depends on the type of debt. If it's high-interest debt, like credit cards, focus on paying that off first. Why? Because the interest you're paying is probably higher than the returns you'd make from investing.
That's inspiring. Once someone sets aside money for investing, what's next?
Automate it. Set up an automatic transfer from your bank account to your investment account every month. This removes the temptation to spend the money elsewhere. For example, if you decide to invest $100 per month, set up a recurring transfer on payday. That way, you're paying yourself first before anything else.
Automating sounds like a great way to stay consistent. Do you have any tips for staying motivated to stick to a budget?
Absolutely. Here are 2 tips. Visualize your goals. Create a vision board or write down what you're working toward. For example, if you're saving for a vacation, keep a picture of your dream destination on your phone.
That's fantastic advice, James. To recap, track your expenses and find small savings. Follow the 50-30-20 rule to create a budget. Automate your investments to stay consistent.
Exactly. Budgeting isn't about restriction. It's about prioritizing what matters most to you.
Well said, James. Let's move on to the next step, learning and adjusting your investment strategy. We've covered so much already: setting goals, understanding risk, starting small, and budgeting. Now, James, let's talk about something that's often overlooked: learning and adjusting your investment strategy. Why is this step so important?
Great question, Michael. Investing isn't something you set and forget. The world changes, markets fluctuate, and your financial situation evolves. That's why continuous learning and making adjustments are crucial. As the famous investor Charlie Munger once said, "The big money is not in the buying and selling, but in the waiting." But to wait successfully, you need to stay informed and make thoughtful adjustments when needed.
That makes sense. So how can beginners start learning about investing without feeling overwhelmed?
Start small and focus on reliable sources. Here's a roadmap. Books. Start with beginner-friendly books like The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins or The Little Book of Common Sense. Investing by John C. Bogle.
That's a great start. But James, how do people know when they need to adjust their strategy?
There are a few key moments when adjustments make sense. Life changes. If you get married, have a child, or change jobs, your financial goals may shift. Market shifts. While you shouldn't panic during market downturns, it's a good time to review your portfolio.
That's practical advice. But what if someone feels unsure about making changes?
Don't hesitate to seek professional help. A financial advisor or a robo-advisor can guide you. And remember, investing is a learning process. Even experienced investors make mistakes. It's part of the journey.
That's inspiring. What are some final tips for listeners who want to improve their strategy over time?
Here are 3 tips to keep in mind. Diversify. Don't put all your money into one stock or sector. Spread it across different investments to reduce risk. Stay patient. Remember, investing is a long-term game. Avoid chasing quick profits. Learn from mistakes. If you lose money on an investment, don't beat yourself up. Instead, ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience?
That's so helpful, James. To recap, keep learning through books, podcasts, and trusted sources. Adjust your strategy during major life or market changes. Review and rebalance your portfolio regularly.
Exactly, Michael. And remember this, the best time to start investing was yesterday. The second best time is today. So keep learning, stay curious, and don't be afraid to take action.
Wise words, James. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure, Michael. It's been great talking with you and your audience.
And to our listeners, remember, investing is a journey, not a destination. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it with a friend and subscribe for more practical tips. Until next time.